Tamil Nadu Global Investors Meet 2024 is happening in Chennai on January 7 and 8.
Hello and a warm welcome to Federal special program Capital Beat. India summoned the High Commissioner of Maldives after a row broke out over the derogatory posts made by the three deputy ministers in the Maldivian government for Prime Minister Narendra Modi. Today, there's another development that India's largest travel platform has suspended the flight bookings to Maldives. And this all coming after a boycott call on the Indian media. Now, have the ties between India and Maldives really nosedived? And how will the tension de-escalate? Joining me now is former Ambassador Anil Trigunayat, who's served in Asia, America, Europe, and Africa. And he's not only been a prolific diplomat, but he's also a great writer as well. Thank you so much, Ambassador Trigunayat, for coming on the Federal. And my first question to you really is that what is really happening as far as the India and Maldives ties is concerned, at least after these derogatory posts have surfaced. It looks like, the story is over. The High Commissioner was called in, and it looks like the Indian government wasn't very happy with the suspension because according to what we are hearing, India really wanted these ministers to be sacked. But instead of sacking, they've just been suspended.
You're right. Thank you very much, Niluji. Good to see you again. And in fact, as you know, that Maldives is one of our close strategic ally, nearest country to us in terms of, and India has good civilizational ties, I would say, very strong ones. And these ties have grown over the years. There are always certain political parties who may have a different opinion, and India is a factor in our neighborhood always. So this time, the government of Mr. Muizu came to on the platform which was anti-India. They have been talking about India out campaigns and all that, and eventually they won the election. Of course, there are different analyses why they won, maybe the opposition, which was last 4 or 5 years was trying very hard to cultivate ties with India. There was India First campaign that was launched by their government. However, this present government thinks in a very different way. They think that they're telling us that we want to balance our ties, but on the other hand, it is quite evident that they are a little bit more closer to China and would like to expand their ties with China. So this whole, in the run-up to the elections and thereafter asking Indian military forces or experts or technical experts who are there to leave and all, this has been going on. So there's some kind of an acrimony in relationship which has reached a certain point.
No, and but then, I just wanted a little clarification, Ambassador Trigunayat, that is there a clarity which is on record about the contingent of about 75 Indian troops leaving Maldives? Now, how far is that true? Has it really happened? Because I read it somewhere, I don't remember, where it was said that the Indian troops are still present in Maldives.
Well, I think that, there are certain projects that have been going on, and there have maybe, I have not read definitively, I'm not really part of the system, so I don't know exactly whether they have moved or not. But as you know, that whenever they are there at the pleasure of the host country. So if the host country does not wish to have those technical experts for their security or stability, eventually they leave. It has happened in several countries. It happens, keeps on happening to everybody. So that's not a big problem. And I think that India will pull out from there. Whatever happens to then Maldives' own security is a different thing. They're already having a very major problem, which is terrorism in the country. This is a country which is contributing more than, I think, the highest per capita contributors to the extremist and terrorist groups are coming from Maldives. So that should be the major concern for this government, which is trying to project itself as sort of a heaven on earth or whatever, paradise on earth, with their beautiful beaches, and therefore India is very critical to their economic growth as well. And developmentally initiatives, whatever India has given or done, is tremendous. Now all that is continuing, but at the same time, the kind of comments which were disparaging comments, which were demeaning comments, and coming from ministers, deputy ministers or otherwise, and even about Indians and the Prime Minister, are totally unacceptable and have to be condemned. in the strongest possible terms.
Hmm.
And that's precisely what today, when the High Commissioner was called, Maldivian, he would have been communicated this in the strongest possible words to
Yeah,
tell that.
Ambassador, why do you think that this childish behavior was adopted by those three deputy ministers in the Maldivian government? Even they would have realized what the impact would be. And I was reading it somewhere that, these ministers thought that, Prime Minister Narendra Modi going to Lakshadweep was in a way challenging the Maldivian tourism. Now, that's how they read it.
I think if they read it, that's very, number one, I would say childish in any case. I mean, India is a very big country with more than 6,000 kilometers of coastline, with very beautiful beaches all around. That does not mean that Maldives is the only place which has beaches. There are plenty of them in India too. Uh, at the same time, we have much more. And so when my prime minister goes, I mean, or any Indian for that matter, can go to a place and can write about this. This is a beautiful beach. Some of the places which are virtually virgin islands where nobody has been there. So you find such beauty in those places. So that's what precisely Prime Minister clearly said. And talking about your own country does not mean that. And if they read it
No,
that
but
way,
Ambassador, of course, they've been childish in their behavior, to put out posts like that. But what about India's approach? All these boycott calls, then the largest travel platform canceling the bookings. Are we also trying to just escalate the issue out of nothing?
well, I don't think that, this whole thing became as a social media war. It is
Hmm.
this when the prime minister's tweet that minister lady, she wrote a comment which was really derogatory,
Yeah.
and that's why a lot of Maldivians also condemned this kind of commentary which had come from these ministers.
Hmm.
So it was not, and then this thing once spread. So like when you go to a country for a tourism or whatever it is, you want to feel welcome. That is most important. And especially India is about 250,000 tourists last year went there, and of whom Indian tourists are basically the biggest spenders. So, they contribute a great deal to the economy of the country. Now, the more the thinking that another place in India is going to challenge their supremacy, you don't know, really. I mean, Maldives is also, as such, due to the climate change and all, is in a very difficult situation. They themselves say that I mean, the island might be submerged under the water in a few years' time. Now, that is something very different. But here, to take it to this level is like, as I always say, it is like Kalidas, who was sitting on the branch and cutting it. So, frankly, that's precisely what they have done.
No, but don't you think that both nations are responsible for it? And I mean, there have been exaggerations on both sides. Now, the thing is that uh, is the real problem coming from India's end in the sense that India apparently is not liking Maldives' proximity to China. And that is the major reason of this whole thing escalating.
No, I don't think so. I mean, I don't think the Indian government has made any statements like this and asking the Indians not to travel or anything. There's no ban, there is no this thing. It is people themselves. You see, I mean, after all, you are a proud nation. And if the individual companies or the individuals decide not to travel to a destination uh, because of this or for any other reason, I mean, that is their sovereign choice. So I don't think that it is anything to do with the Indian government, which has said. Indian government has not said it. Indian government believes, in my view, and having been a part of it, I know that you have to correct these distortions. But at the same time, you don't want to burn the boat completely. It is the competition with China is a reality in every domain and every geography, as far as India is concerned. So we don't have to worry about it. We need to prepare, and we are prepared for it. And I think that is a very different kind of a thing. It is for the people of Maldives to see what is in their national interest. Seeing
But
what
do
happened to Chinese dead diplomacy in Sri Lanka or elsewhere, that is for them to judge, not for us. So, from our point of view, in the amount of developmental assistance India has provided, I mean, that you can just see it on the net and everywhere, and it's acknowledged by them. Whether it is in the pandemic or otherwise, our security, need of water, they are the nearest to us.
No,
So,
but Ambassador, do you feel that this is a deliberately engineered crisis by Maldives? Given the fact that, president is visiting China, and that, of course, has never happened. Normally, the Maldivian president has always traveled to India first. And this time he's chosen to go to China. And so in a way, is Maldives trying to give a royal snub to India, if I may ask you?
Well, I mean, it was very evident from the very beginning, if you remember, when this government was coming into power or their campaign was there, that was against India. It was India out campaign all along. So it was expected that if they win, what line they are going to take. So there is no surprise in that. But to do it to this extent, and that's why their official statement, even though insufficient, in my view, was basically saying that it is not the government policy, which they have very clearly said. But of course, suspension is nothing of such people, which is going to decimate the relationship to a great extent. So I think
Right.
that in that particular sense, uh, President Muzu must have done something more to
Right.
address the situation. Because, see, at the end of the day, uh, India is a neighbor for them and is a reliable neighbor. Always, whether it was the security, stability, Operation Cactus, the water provided to them in the pandemic, or when they have any natural disasters, tsunami and everywhere. India is the first country to come to their rescue and has helped them. Now, this is an irony in our neighborhood that most of them feel threatened sometimes because of the India's gigantic this thing. But the India has been a benign neighbor to everybody, and non-reciprocal neighborhood first policy, which encompasses everyone, frankly, including Pakistan for that matter.
No, but do you think that the things have gone beyond repair as far as India and Maldives ties are concerned? Given the fact that India wanted the sacking, but only the suspension has taken place, the Indian High Commissioner was called on. Then there is an economic boycott, if I may call, because if the tourism is going to be suspended between the two countries, flights not going there, it's really going to impact Maldives.
Well, I think that we need to wait and watch how it eventually plays out, what redressal Maldives takes, its leadership takes, because frankly, it would be very unwise for them to completely, have a problem-ridden relationship with India. That will
Right.
not be productive for them at all. And I don't see that in their national interest if they will do it. They are smart people. So they will be able to see that. Secondly, political parties come and go. It is not something. The relationship is something much more deeper. You have seen in Afghanistan, you know what India did over 20 years there. They have been called back again by the people. Taliban itself wanting India to come back and complete those projects which they started. So what India is doing is for the people of that country. And the people of that country are worried because if Indian tourism dries up completely, then nobody can replace it to that extent. So that is something I think that it is in their own interest not to cut the branch completely in that sense. And I think it will not happen. I'm sure
Right.
that after a few days, they will take some more action and there will be some
Right.
sorting out will be done. It
Ambassador,
cannot be the business like the before. That is
right.
very, yes. But
Right. So
China as a factor remains
no,
there.
but what I want to ask you is that even if things normalize between India and Maldives, it's not going to be like earlier times, given the kind of strain which we have seen between the two countries now.
Well, I mean, I personally, being a realist, I don't expect that to happen also. Because if a government has come on a certain platform, for the public perception or for its own vote bank, it will continue to harp on that. This is precisely what happens in these situations. But internally, you can always repair the ties. I mean, there are different ways of doing it. And that can be done. I mean, they need to have some kind of a public statements with regard to it. Like they're saying that the government is not involved in this. There's some individual opinions and all that. That is just to brush it off. But this cannot be brushed off because this has a connectivity to various other factors that have played out in the recent past.
But Ambassador, what is really happening with India's foreign policy as far as its neighbors are concerned? I'm just not talking about Maldives. Now look at what's happening in Nepal. Look at what's happening with China. We already know, of course, there are economic compulsions due to which our relations with China are on. But Sri Lanka, Bhutan, Nepal, these are so many nations, where things don't seem to be going right. And India seems to be losing out on its old allies, old partners. What's really going on as far as the foreign policy with the neighbors is concerned?
Firstly, I think this is a very dismal picture that you have painted. It is far from reality, frankly. I mean, that is not the case. It is true that there are always differences with the countries because each country looks at its own interest from its own prism. You see, that's the beauty of the foreign policy and diplomacy. I mean, the whole purpose is to subserve your interests. Now, the interest is defined by a particular government at a given time. Now, if these countries are democracies, there will be different kind of political parties will come up. India, because of cultural, civilizational, because of size of the economy, because of the size of the military, because of its growing profile, obviously, sometimes unwillingly tends to give them an impression that, oh, we have such a big partner next to us and we might be consumed by it. And so what they try to create this balance interest. Then they go to China and then swinging between this and that. So in my view, they are becoming a little bit more smarter in that sense that let us try to balance. So the balancing of interests that is taking place for them between India and China. Now that will tend to give an impression in the short term that, okay, these countries have become pro-China or anti-India or like that. But that's not
But
really
during
true.
this balancing act, does it not also undermine India's positioning in many ways? Now look at what's happening in Maldives. Now, if the president doesn't come to India and he says that, we need to rework on our engagements and diplomatic engagements of the earlier government also, like what the president said. So what does it stand for India? I mean, what does it speak of India then?
You know that this kind of seesaw continues with different political parties. I mean, they have their own agenda. And I said that this is a balancing. And what they do is when they always try to accuse A party of being closer to India, B party being closer to this. And then when that party comes that tries to prove also that same thing. But at the end of the day, I mean, I would presume that every country wants to serve its own national interest first, irrespective. Now, what is their perception of that? That is our job also to reach out to them, to convince them. And they're already convinced at the grassroots level, if you come to think of it. Nepal, for example, you said, just as Dr. Jaishankar was there last week only, he just went there, signed so many projects. They are looking for development of their countries. But they are also now stuck between the two big powers which have their global ambitions. And therefore, I think that from that perspective, they want to extract the maximum attention of these countries. So that is also probably that is playing out in my view. But India has done what India has done. India's policy is non-reciprocal. We have not asked them for anything in return, either a market access or any investment or anything. What India does is provides the developmental assistance so that these economic insecurities of these countries and ensure that they are ended and that the security and stability in these countries, which is good for us, because anything insecure around us is also not good for our own growth and development. So that's
No,
what
but
India tries to do.
right. There are competing interests between China and India, and of course, how the smaller nations, fall for either China or India. Now, during this, entire thing, what we are witnessing now, what do we say? Will China really consume India? Is it so easy to do that, given the fact that the way the Belt and Road Initiative is expanding, and India does fear that China might expand its footprints in the Indian Ocean. And that's what the biggest fear is. And the latest example, of course, is Maldives. So what happens then?
Well, I think that to say that China could consume India is, I think, wishful thinking for the Chinese or anybody else. This is not true. China, if at all, in my personal view, uh, if it at all is concerned about the growth of any country, and that is India.
Okay.
We must not, in the region and outside the region, because we are two different models. Indian economy is today the fastest growing economy, even though they are 5 times bigger to us. But we are catching up quite fast. India is the resident power in the Indian Ocean. So what happens is they have a newfound respect for India in China, in my view. So when they consider you as a competition, but we also consider them as a competition. But there is a formula which is business can't be as usual unless you address my mutual interests and respect the agreements that are there. That is there between us and China. That is continuing. But as I said in the beginning, that China is going to be are challenged in every geography. And we have to contend that.
No, but Ambassador Trigunayat, many experts and who critically appraise the foreign policy, they do say many times that, there's something deeply wrong with India's foreign policy, and especially with the way it's treating its neighbors. So why do you think these voices are becoming louder? You talk to many experts and they say that, something is deeply wrong.
I think that if you see things in a peripheral manner, you may arrive at that conclusion. I'm not going to challenge those experts. They might be knowing it. But what I can say is, I mean, how do you judge it? By one single incident? By some single events that have taken place? Some rebuffs here and there? Some misalignments here and there? They are not going to define the partnership and relationship. Look at Nepal. Look at Sri Lanka. Sri Lanka was completely there with the Chinese debt diplomacy. Today, everybody is realizing that they don't want to get into that. And they are coming back to India in that sense. Nepal, just now, the minister announced so many projects there. The Bangladesh, you have an example in front of you, one of the closest relationships. Bhutan, you mentioned also. The Bhutan is, every country is trying to exercise its own autonomy at the same time, which India promotes. I mean, we are always saying there should be some strategic autonomy. So we are not looking at alliances. We are looking of alignment of interest. So that's the difference. Now, problem is with many of the experts is that they start looking at your relationship, our relationship with our neighborhood as some kind of an alliance pattern. Whereas India's relationship with other countries is not seen as an alliance pattern. So expectations out of an alliance are very different, that they will toe your line completely, blindly and all. That is not going to happen. And I don't think India expects that. The least India expects from the neighbors, I must say, is out of this non-reciprocal amount of investment, developmental assistance, and all that India provides, is that our core security concerns are not compromised from their land like it is being done from Pakistan.
At the beginning of the interview, you mentioned about the social media war which escalated between India and Maldives. And this is my last question to you, that is the social media really responsible for the nosediving of ties between Maldives and India? Because obviously the derogatory posts were made by the Maldivian ministers, to which then there was an uproar on the Indian social media. And that's how the things are. So is social media really responsible for the nosediving of the ties between India and Maldives?
Well, the quality of the social media is that it can, expand this information beyond proportions to a very large number of people in a shortest possible time. And therefore, it multiplies very fast, the information content, right or wrong, whatever it is. But in this particular case, since the social media was taken the course to by these ministers and others, writing and denigrating India and disparaging the prime minister and all that, obviously it provoked a tremendous response and reaction from any proud country and the proud citizens of a country. So I would not, I mean, why would we blame a media for that matter? It is, people have to also see that what kind of the statement they are making, which will provoke that kind of a reaction.
But you
Today,
don't
the
see
speed
this,
of interaction and reaction is very, very fast.
but you don't see this as a deliberately engineered crisis to send a message to India. Because diplomatically, of course, Maldives cannot take a very hard stand. So that's why they could have, triggered everything through the social media to send out a message to India.
Well, if they want to send this kind of a message in such an immature manner, I think that good luck to them.
All right. Thank you so much, Ambassador Trigunayat. It was wonderful having you on the program. And one appeal to the viewers who are watching this interview, subscribe to our channel, send us your feedback, and stay tuned to The Federal.
Tamil Nadu Global Investors Meet 2024 is happening in Chennai on January 7 and 8. Subscribe to The Federal's YouTube page for more news and updates.